Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and this week I am going to get this roll cage finished. Hey guys, so before I got to work on the car this week, I thought I would do something about how hot my garage gets. So my garage is usually sitting at least 10 degrees Celsius hotter than the ambient temperature outside. So it just becomes a really hideous place to work. And when it was yesterday, there was a record set in Western Sydney of 47.3 degrees. Yeah, I think it's time to fit some whirlybirds and get some of this hot air out of my garage. So first job, let's get into it. Okay, so fingers crossed, now I'll actually have a much cooler area inside the garage, or at least a bit. Let's get back to the car. Okay, now that the garage is a little bit cooler, I've actually been going over in my mind about these mounts all week, and I'm not happy with, the main thing I'm not happy with is the angle of this, this cage, because it slopes back too far and it doesn't comply. The issue is that when you stand it up, there is a limit between how close the top of the bar can come to the driver's head, and when the seat's back, that's where it comes an issue. But what I'm going to do, I've decided I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to remake these feet. So after all that work last week, I'm going to cut these out and I'm going to mount them up the top of this plate here and get them back as close as I can to this wheel arch, while still leaving enough room to trim it, because I still want trim on this. So now it's time to cut all this stuff out that I spent so long working on last week and build it again. All right, so I've managed to do up a design that I should be able to reuse my the bolt-on feet for my cage, but obviously these bits are now junk. But what I've done is I've changed my design and I've added the side flap, so hopefully I can make this all out of one piece and just bend it down and then weld it together so that it will sit in here nicely. And in here it tucks into this corner nicely. It sits back closer to the wheel arch, so I can stand the cage up a little bit more, and it's time to start making up some feet. Okay, so I've got my new feet bent up, and it's a nice tight fit, which is good. As you saw, my sheet of steel was not quite wide enough for me to be able to fold the side tab down and make the whole mounting foot out of one single sheet. But these are ready to go. They fit in quite nicely. So now it's time to tidy them all up and weld them in. So as you saw, I had them hoop back in the car, and because I built these boxes up higher, obviously I've got to cut some more off of my main hoop. And I've marked on here, trying to get it square, work out what I need to cut. I've got a rough idea to start with. I'm going to cut a bit less than I need, so then I can just work my way down. So hopefully I can do it without overcutting this far side. If I do, then I'm going to have to raise up that diagonal tube, which means cutting it off and re-notching it, and yeah, it's annoying. I don't want to do that. So hopefully I've still got enough in there to just trim it up. All right, I've been going backwards and forwards, and I've been trimming off the ends of this main hoop to try and get the heights and everything just right. And I still need to cut another 10 mil or so off, and I'm down to the joint of the diagonal bar over here. So that means cut off the diagonal bar, and it's going to be a bit more playing around to get that to fit again. But it's got to be done. At least now, if I take the diagonal bar out, I'll be able to fit this back into the drop saw, because at the moment it's been interfering with this side, so I could only cut one side on the drop saw and the other side I had to do by hand. Okay, I've got my cage in here. I've got a couple of blocks of wood to hold it sort of the right height. Now, the feet over there are lined up nicely, and you can see that there's very little room there for the trim between the cage and the wheel arch. The angles are now good. We've got about 1 degree of slope back on the car, around 81, but that actually translates to about 8 degrees rearward slope. So we can have up to 10, so that's enough. That's about as good as I'm going to get the main hoop. The distance back from the steering wheel, there's not much I can do about that. That is what it is. So now it's time to tack the cage in. So as you can see, yeah, it's pretty tight in here. Getting this cage to be just right and just legal is a real difficulty. I can't see how there's any other way to build a legal cage. In my case, I have a short torso and long legs, so my seat is usually further back, but my mirror's tilted down, if that makes sense to a lot of you guys. So unless you actually cut out the wheel arches and move the whole cage back inside the wheel arches, it's not physically possible. You can move the steering wheel forward and potentially the pedals forward a bit, but that's sort of where you're going to be limited. So either way, I built this cage. It's all removable, so that's one bonus. So I can bolt it in if I need it, and if not, I can just pull it out. Easy. All right, so now we've got main hoop in. The next thing I've got to work on is building my rear stays. Now, they've got to come from the corner of the main hoop down to the back here somewhere. And I've seen a bunch of different methods of doing it. Some build them on the front side here of the strut towers. But the bulk of the ones I've seen, and I think the way I'm going to go, is to build them on top of this flat area on top of the strut towers in the back here. This looks like it's got like a piece of aluminium plate or something stuck on here. So I'm going to flip that off, and I'll probably re-weld on a big flat steel sheet so that I've got something solid to mount onto. Okay, so now I've got my rear mounting plates loosely lined up. I have to try and make the rear lateral bars. And I had the same issue on the 911. It is really difficult. These are the sort of the most difficult, most head scratching bars to make. Multiple angles, trying to work out how to do the right angle notch to fit the bar in. So what I've done is I've got a piece of tube here, and I'm going to use this as this is a piece of scrap. I'm going to use this as a bit of a template and just get a rough notch, work out roughly what it needs to be, get them close. I'm not going to go to town, and then I'll be able to cut it out of a good piece of tube and make up the real ones. Okay, so I've done a bit of playing around, and using this old piece of scrap, I've made a mock-up of roughly what I need to cut out. I've sort of worked out that's pretty good as far as the angle goes. This is pretty good as far as the angle goes. It all sort of lines up nicely. And it's a bit bigger than I need, so it has space to trim up. So I'm just going to replicate this out of my good tube and start seeing if I can fit it. Alright, so now I've got my piece mostly in place, and this end is notched quite nicely, but this far end is on, the angle is not quite right. Alright, that was a lot of trimming, but I've finally got this one rear stay just the way I want it. I've got a second plate here to simulate my foot that I still got to make up for this one to mount onto my mounting plate. So now I've got one side done, I've got to go over and get the other side ready. Okay, quick change of plan. This is the length that I have left of a current piece of tube, and it looks like it's just about the right length for what I need for a harness bar. If I built it off of the rear stays and I can put a harness bar between the rear stays, it will actually sit too high, because by the rules, the harness bar has to be level or lower than the driver's shoulder. And I just did a quick check before with me in the car, and I'm roughly about the waterline of this car is roughly where my shoulders sit. I can build a brace through the center of this bar, similar to what I did on the 911. The only issue is, as you've seen, I need every little bit of space I have for the seat, and currently the seat sort of sits back inside this part of the cage a little bit. So I really don't want to put the harness bar there and then you can't go any further. So if I can't put it on the rear stays because it's too high, and I can't put it on here, then what I'm thinking is I can actually do two bends. So I can do a bend off of the main hoop and a bend on either end, and have the harness bar set back a little bit behind the crossbar. So that means taking my piece of tube, which is just about the right length, and marking where I want to bend it, and then I need to bend both ends and then notch it so that it can fit my main hoop. All right, those bends look really good. I will put that aside for now. I can notch it in later, but I just wanted to make sure I use that before I started on a new tube, and yeah, don't want to waste materials. Okay, that second backstay was much quicker and easier to do than the first one. That's my backstay where I want it. So now I'm just going to mark roughly where it sits, so then I can work out where I actually want to put my foot. So I'll do this on both sides, and then it's time to start making up some feet for the rear part of the cage. Okay, I've got my mounting plates all made up and captive nuts welded into the bottom so they can sit on there. So now I need to go through and tack them into place. Okay, so now the basic cage is all tacked together just the way I wanted it. And I've chucked my big level through here just so I can mark the waterline on the cage before I take it out of the car. Now is the big test to see if I can actually unbolt it and if it is actually possible to shoehorn it out of the car. Alright, so I managed to get it out of the car, and the next thing I need to do is fit this harness bar. Now the harness bar needs to go on there, something like that. Now is the fun bit, is trying to trim it down without over trimming it and getting the same off of both sides so that it fits just right onto the back of the cage. Well, that is a hell of a lot of work going backwards and forwards because I didn't want to cut off too much and make it too short and not fit. But now it sits on there beautifully, nice and even curve. So now I'm going to put the cage back in the car and tack it together in the car so I make sure I get it at the right spot. So all of the parts of the cage are in and they're tacked together. I am too tired today to even try and think of tackling nice, neat roll cage world, so I'm going to leave it there. I suppose it must mean it's time for fun facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hi guys, the Fairlady ZG was a Japan-only model released in October 1971. It was introduced to homologate the 240Z for Group 4 racing. It was distinctive for its extended fiberglass nose, its rear spoilers, its riveted on wheel arches, and its acrylic headlights. It was only available in 3 colours: Grand Prix Red, Grand Prix White, and Grand Prix Maroon. Although they were never sold in the US, the nose was offered as a dealer option in order to be eligible for competition in the States.
Alright guys, that's it for another week. I am done with the structure of the cage. It just needs to be welded together, and that is going to be done next week when I'm rested. But I'm glad it's done. I'm happy with it. It's all come together really nicely, and it's good. So next week weld it up, and I have no idea what I'm doing there. But as always, if you want to help the channel out, head down to the store, and in the description you can buy some shirts, hoodies, or some very cool coffee mugs. And please like and subscribe to Home Built by Jeff, and you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at the same place. All right, see you guys.
Homologate?
Homologate.
Homologate. That's a lot to remember. It was distinctive for its extended fiberglass nose. It was extended... Oh my god, I'm never going to do this. It was distinctive for its extent...